didn't give you new sheets because we have a lot to do from the old sheets yet. We just began. I just want to recap quickly. We started this piece in Chumash because of a footnote in Navi. Okay, the footnote is on the idea that Reb Yaakov says sometimes for one person it's an Aveira, and like David HaMelech, and for another person it's actually something we strive for. But in a footnote, Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky brings that Reb Yaakov used to say a similar thing about Kriyas Yamsuf, that even though the Jewish people were never supposed to have Kriyas Yamsuf because they were supposed to go right there to Yisrael, Vayihi b'shalach paro es ha'am v'lo nechamu l'kim derech eretz plishtim ki karov hu. Right? Why? Because he said maybe they'll see milchama v'yashuva mitzrayim. Right? In other words, they weren't really ready to fight, and therefore he couldn't take them directly to Israel, which he wanted to. And I don't know what would have happened with Matan Torah at that point. Would it have been in the desert, not in the desert, who knows? But he didn't take them. He took the Derech Yamsuf, and something that looks like a b'di'evid became like every day we see Kriyas Yamsuf in Oz Yashir. And the biggest miracles came out of that, even though it was all Ki'ilu, quote unquote, b'di'evid. Okay? And Reb Yaakov adds a halacha that the Rashba paskins that if you don't bring Kriyas Yamsuf into Kriya Shema, meaning to Birchas Kriya Shema, you're not Yotze properly Kriya Shema. That's how important Kriyas Yamsuf is, both in Shachris and Arvis. The Mishnah Berurah does not paskin that way, but Reb Yaakov says, you see how great it is, how important it is, even though it never should have happened. So this Reb Yaakov over here in Chumash really gives a deep hesber to this idea, and we'll talk a lot about it. I'm going to mention, I mentioned last week already that Wayne Coven many, many years ago was disposed from one thing that Reb Yaakov said here, and we'll talk about it. I'll try to
remember it.
But you remember it?
I hope I remember it.
You will. You will. I'm going to give you the hint that you remember it. Anyway, Reb Yaakov says that one has to know that there's not just one derech in the way God runs the world. From the Rambam, you see, could be even two drachim. What does that mean? The Rambam calls it machshava rishona, machshava shniya, and the Rambam gives the case of vayi b'shalach paro. The machshava rishona was supposed to go straight there to Yisrael, but they couldn't go for a technical reason, meaning they weren't ready. So machshava shniya. Okay, it could be. You could say the same thing, by the way, with Aseres Adibros, Dibros Rishonos, Shniyos. You could apply this to a lot of places, this Rambam. I may even bring up some more places, even La Halacha, you could apply it. But Rabbi Yaakov says that this Rambam is a yesod for him, and it answers up the parsha of Shimon and Levi and Yaakov, the parsha of Dinah and the rape of Dinah. So Rabbi Yaakov raised a few questions. One of the questions he raised was that until the children come home after Dinah is raped and they come to Yaakov, right? It's before they come to Yaakov. He finds out Dinah is raped. He says nothing. He waits for them to come home. And Reb Yaakov wants to know, why didn't he answer Hamar and Shechem before the kids came home? Why did he wait for the kids to come home for them to go and do something? That's one. Two, it says in the pasuk, Asher times dina chosam, which seems to be like something extra in the pasuk, because in the pasuk over there it says like this: when the kids come back here, Shechem and Hamor spoke and said, Shechem, my son, wants to marry your daughter. He says to Yaakov, right? And we'll sit together. We'll live together, like one family. Vayanu b'nei Yaakov es Shechem es Hamor aviv. The b'nei Yaakov, not Yaakov, b'nei Yaakov answer. Vayedaberu, and they spoke. As Hamor aviv b'mirma, they answered in a devious way. Vayedaberu, and then it doesn't say what they said right away. It has a parenthesis. Asher timeis dina achotam. That he defiled Dinah, their sister. Okay, so Reb Yaakov said it's very strange. It should have said that Bnei Yaakov answered, Eschem v'schamor aviv b'mirma, vayomru aleihem, lo nuchal lasot hadavar zeh. Just skip the words, asher timei es Dinah al chosam. It doesn't sort of fit in, right? So Reb Yaakov has to answer that problem. He's going to answer that problem. That number 3, he says, Shimon and Levi killed the people of Shechem, and Yaakov got very angry. But then it says that after Yaakov screamed at them, they said, right? Will our sister allow our sister to become a prostitute? Now, we don't find that Yaakov answered them. So it sounds like he agreed. That's what Yaakov points out. But at the end, Reb Yaakov said he didn't exactly agree. And the last question he raises, that Yaakov certainly knew when they told them to do Milah that they were doing it b'mirma. There's no question that they weren't going to marry into these people. Yaakov just thought that they're doing this in order to get the sister back, right? So he says, why did Yaakov wait to get angry at them, right? After they killed Anshe Shechem, if they did something b'mirma, why didn't Yaakov tell them you can't do something like that b'mirma? Why didn't he tell them? This is Reb Yaakov's. They're not kashas. They're sheilot to try to understand the parshanut here. So Reb Yaakov then brings the Rambam that we read that holds that there are 2 approaches in Judaism. There is the common approach in a common case. We'll call it the normal case, right? And how you're supposed to act in the normal case. And then there is the unusual case or the abnormal case. Okay? And go to page 6 that I gave you last time. It says like this. New paragraph, right side, Reish Chaf, page Reish Chaf. Kisheshchem chamor aviv bo liYaakov kedei lisa v'liten imo al nesui Dina lechamor ulichud ben shnei amim. When Shechem and Chamor, his father, came to Yaakov to do some give and take, some discussion about the marriage, right? Yoda Yaakov shemanosha misugam shel Shechem v'Chamor efshar litnaeg ba'ofen shel machshava rishona. By the way, I'm going to get to Jonathan Stassen's question from last week. I'm going to talk about it. I mentioned that already last week. Well, you don't remember the question, but I'll go over it. You can't deal with these people, Shechem and Chamor, the way they treated Dinah and the way they lived their lives in Canaan. You can't deal with them on the normal, usual level. If Yaakov would say to them, give me back my daughter right now, how dare you rape my daughter, right? That's the way it should happen, right? What do you mean you want to marry my daughter? Who the heck are you anyway? Bunch of behemoths, right? His name is Chamor, right? So who do you think you are? Give me back my daughter. You can't hold my daughter hostage, right? It wouldn't have worked. Don't we know this, by the way? That's not the way you deal with these people. Okay? Right? The Rambam's second approach, meaning it's not the way you do in normal, but unusual circumstances. Aval Yaakov, B'Torah Netzik Hanal Shel Torah Se'emes Ba'olam. Yaakov Titan Emes LiYaakov. Right? Titan Emes Yaakov. Lo Hay Yochel Harshos LaAtzmo Lachrog Migidro L'Taheg Im Shechem V'Chamor Ba'orma. He couldn't. Chirurg is what's it in English?
Surgeon.
What?
Surgery?
Yeah, but it means it's surgery. It's correct. It means to go the normal lachrog gidro and agim shchem chamor.
Lachrog. Not. I thought you said something else. Okay.
To deviate.
To deviate, that's a good word. He couldn't do that because he represented emes. Okay, we'll talk about Lavan soon. B'shvil Yaakov, hoiset nagut me'enzu stia chada mikol ma shedorish v'limit b'nei doro. This type of approach for Yaakov was a acting like a stia, leaving the straight path, stia chada, a real, right turn from the all that he ever spoke about. That's why Yaakov was quiet. He knew the first way to talk to them won't help, and the second way he talked to them he can't do. So he didn't know what to answer. So if you know what to answer, the best thing is to keep quiet, right? Now, Jonathan asked me, I remember asking it myself. Jonathan asked me, well, Yaakov was pretty good at lying when it came to Lavan, right? And he's pretty devious when it came to Lavan. Why all of a sudden here becomes the big tzaddik, right? When his daughter is being kidnapped. So the answer to that question is, I never spoke to Reb Yaakov about it, but I thought about this, and I discussed it once with Rabbi Yosef as well, and he agreed. The answer is by Lavan, Yaakov didn't lie. Lavan is the one who lied. Yaakov just played the game with him, right? Lavan is the one who changed his maskoret and said this and that. Yaakov just figured out a way how to get the sheep anyway. Even though Lavan thought he figured out a way how Yaakov won't have any sheep, but he figured out he's going to get the sheep anyway, right? So that's very different than going and lying to the people. That's number one. Number two, I feel that when Yaakov came back to Eretz Yisrael, he was different than when he was doing in Lavan. Here he already came back as an Av, one of the three Avot, and he had to make a Kiddush Hashem in Eretz Yisrael, just like Avram and Yitzchak did. He couldn't do what he did even with Lavan, even though it's, again, very different than with Lavan. So that's why I feel it's not such a question. So he says, what question? Yeah.
And the brachot?
Yeah.
The brachot, when he stole the brachot from Esav earlier on.
Yeah.
Isn't it the same?
So I asked that. You remember last week I said to Jonathan, why are you asking from the pay, not from the hay, right? What was the brachot, right? That he did that, right? It sounds like he was lying, right? Again, over there, Rivka is really the one that pushed him through. Number one, number two, and you see that Rashi tries to make him not lying, right? Right? He tries to kvetch out of it. But again, I feel there's one thing if you're doing it with family, and there's another thing when you do it with Umas Ha'olam, with Lavan, and you do it with Shem. No, that's a whole different ballgame when you do it with them. When you're doing it with family, even though Esav is Esav, but he's still family, right? And you want to get that, and your mom says to you, you have a right to it, or you should get it. So there's a certain, since he didn't mamish lie here, he would mamish answer them, I want to make a deal with you, like Shimon and Levi did, and then lie about it, basically, So I still think there's a difference, but I never asked Reb Yaakov. It's a good question. I never asked Reb Yaakov. Okay, but he says like this: but to his children, he did give over this type of approach of machshava shniya. Because sometimes a person has to act that way. By the way, I don't think Reb Yaakov means it's b'di'evet, because the Kriyas Yamsuf was not b'di'evet. Once you have a machshava shniya, it becomes a lechatchila, right? Even though lechatchila you should have machshava rishona, but once you have to do because of circumstances, it becomes the way to go, right? And therefore, I felt from Reb Yaakov when he told this over to me that he held it's really another path, but when you take that path, it becomes the machshava shniya becomes a lechatchila. That's the way you have to work. Ukamamar Navi, like it says by David HaMelech said, Imikesh titapol. David HaMelech says with a guy who is a A ikesh means like it says in Hazinu, right? A person who's underhanded, titapo. You should be underhanded. You should, I don't know if it's from the word nafal, but play the game with him. For himself, he was afraid of a chilul Hashem. But on his children, he didn't feel there's a chilul Hashem because they don't represent what Yaakov represented. Ulefikach kasher rocha Yaakov she'ena yochel anos klum l'shchem v'chamor lo machshava rishon lo machshava shniya l'chein echarish Yaakov ad shechazru banav min hasadeh. Until his children came back, he was quiet. But then he told his kids what happened, and you see they reacted very strongly, especially Shimon and Levi. V'amen kavanas Yaakov machshavto hayta kasher isbir Ramban she'al yidei amila yachalishu b'nei Yaakov es anshei Shechem ad kedei gach shehem yuchlu likanes lebeiso shel Shechem v'lakach et adino l'tzeit ben ha'ir. What did Yaakov think? What are the brothers? What's their machshava shniya? What's their underhandedness? Right? This deception that they're going to make them do bris milah, and now they won't be able to fight them, and they'll go take Dina that way because they won't get Dina another way. But something greater than this, destroying the whole city, Yaakov, he didn't think about this because he was a little bit on the small side. I mean, center. He was center. But he was surprised and he was in shock from what they did. Okay. Right? Shitaso haisa the af shalafi matzav hayimuter lem litnaheg bofen armumi al b'shum ofen lo utalem litnaheg ba limutu tkifut. But he didn't think that they have a right to kill out the city, right? That, by the way, that's the Ramban. The Ramban says he didn't think such a thing. He was in shock. Kikol darko umahalcho ba'afotzes Torah Shem be'olam nostal emes vanoam. Because Yaakov's whole derech and mahalach in spreading Torah in the world was nosdala emes vanoam, like darchei noam, upula shikrit v'armumit kazu shosu Shim Levi ha'isum usu beinav v'zor l'tamo. Now he says that Yaakov couldn't handle such an approach of such an extreme approach, the lechi approach, so to speak, right? He couldn't handle that. Yaakov could, but if you look, right, so in other words, what is he saying? He's saying that Yaakov felt that it shouldn't be done like this. But if you look at the text over there, it's a little bit different. The text says over here, right, what's going to happen is that the people of the land are going to rebel against us now. He says to them, here, let me just give you the lashon. Here, right? He says over here, that what was he afraid of? He was afraid that the people of the land are going to say, you came to our land to start, taking over the land, colonizing, so you're killing out the people, right? They're going to come and make a war on us, and with so few people, right? Is that what actually happened?
No.
Okay, that didn't happen. Just remember that really well. Nobody rose up. Okay? The old man Yaakov was afraid of it. It didn't happen. We always forget that. Okay? Let's see what Reb Yaakov has to say here.
Was Yaakov not at all concerned about them? If they only injured them and then they took Dina, then they would also chase him in that case?
Why wasn't Yaakov concerned about that, you're saying?
Yeah, he should have also been concerned about.
I think probably that's one of the things Shimon and Levi were concerned about. All right? I think they were. Your question is, well, why didn't Yaakov think of that? Because Yaakov could be, I'm just speculating over here, but it could be that Yaakov felt we're not allowed to do anything more than this type of ishtadlus, right? If something else happens because of it, we'll have to deal. It could be held like that. But Shimon and Levi definitely held like what you're saying. They definitely held, you know what? I'm going to make sure that I'm going to put the fear of heaven into these guys. I'm going to put the fear of heaven. They're not going to do anything after this. Because don't mess with us, because we can be as devious as you guys. And maybe more so. Right? I think that that's really what's going on over here. Yaakov said, I'm doing a shtadlus, to get her out. What's going to happen afterwards? Okay, we'll have to deal. Right? By the way, these are the two approaches in Eretz Yisrael today. One approach is, let's make peace and we'll deal afterwards. And the other approach is, what are you, out of your mind? You know what you're going to have to deal with afterwards? Right? Yeah, in other words, let's give Azab, Gush Katif back to them, and then we'll deal with it. Right? Well, okay, now you're dealing with it. Right? So Shimon and Levi would have said, let's get rid of the people in Azab. Forget about giving back Gush Katif. If we have any trouble, let's get rid of people. There's two different. It's a machshava rishona, machshava shniya. With Hamas, you have to deal machshava shniya. They have that's exactly. It's the case of kidnapping, right? Kidnapping. What are you going to deal with them in a politically correct way? Come on, right? These are people you can't. Okay, we have the whole world to worry about. Yes, that's what Yaakov said. We have the world to worry about, right? Shimon and Levi didn't care. What did he say? What did they say when Yaakov screamed at them? That was the last. That's the last line. They get the last word. Yaakov says nothing after that, right? So you see that they, like Reb Yaakov said, it looks like that they convinced Yaakov about it, but not exactly. Okay, so let's take a look at the next two paragraphs, which are very interesting, and then I'll tell you the story about Meir Kahana and Rabbi Riskin, and the part that Wayne was so nispol about. Okay, that will do. Shuvasam shel Shimon v'Levi achazoni yaseh chesenu niras kamo shenicha et daito shel Yaakov le'etata. It seems that Yaakov didn't answer them back. He didn't have a good answer for them. So Yaakov said, "Okay, maybe they're right." Ki arei ein hu onek klum al devrei. He doesn't answer. Avla emes he Yaakov kedan olehem. Yaakov did answer. Avlo achshav harbe shanim la'achar mikan. Kishigia shaitel sheYaakov lipater min me'olam v'korah l'chol banav levorech himself. Omar Shimon v'Levi achim klei chomes micheirosehem. Right? What does it say over there? That Shirachi they're achim. Of course, they're all achim, but Shimon and Levi are achim. Achim, Rashi says, if I'm not saying mistake, or the Rishonim say over there, achim they have the same ideology, right? Klei chamas, their utensils are chamas, right? The word mecherosem is not so clear what it means. Some people say it means weaponry, or it means their nature, right? Klei chamas is their nature. V'lo rak zeh. He punished them by saying, I'm going to spread them in Yaakov and spread them out in Israel, right? They did it together, right? So now we're going to spread them all out so they won't be able to get together. In order that they can't do something like they originally did, Yaakov was afraid. In other words, it's very interesting over here, because according to what Yaakov thinks over here, it's not a one-shot deal that they got really angry about their sister. This is their DNA, man. Okay? And Yaakov says, later on in history, I got to be worried about this, right? So he says that Klei Chamas, so what we have to do with these guys is Achal kem b'Yaakov, afitzeh b'Yisrael, right? Kolomar, sheruyihem shibor v'lo yeh b'yachad k'dei shelo yuchli nekem lasos ra. V'chei pirshu sham hapashtanim. The parshanim over there are mafarish like this. Avol Rashi sham mavar sheYaakov amar l'Shimon v'Levi, right? Okay. Shehem yiyu asofrim V'amalamdei tinoko sheyelchu me'ir le'ir l'taken es tashmishe kedusha l'lamed es bnei Yisrael Torah. The Shimon Levi, what does Rashi say? I'm going to be Achal came b'Yaakov. It's him. What does that mean? They're going to be the Melamed Tinokos, the Sofrim, Sofrei Stam, maybe it means, not so clear. Sheyelchu me'ir le'il takenis atashmishe kedusha, which sounds like a sofer, right? L'lamed bnei Yisrael Torah. That's what Shimon and Levi are going to be doing. V'cheinu b'yalkut shmoni parshas Vayechi. Rabbi Yaakov brings a medrash here. B'shasha hargu Shechem v'chol anshe yir lo nimlachu b'aviyim v'oru kasam b'yotzer. The medrash points out, how come they didn't go to Yaakov and say, listen, this is our plan. We're going to kill them out. They didn't ask Yaakov. You know why? Because Yaakov would have said chas v'sholem, right? You don't ask. You ask, they call, the what do you call it? As mefrekt is treif. If you ask, it's treif, right? So don't ask, right? So he says, they didn't take advice from their father. From Shimon you're going to get Sofrim, and Mashnim are probably assistants, like a Sheni, Mishneh, like Lechem Mishneh. What?
Or maybe Mishanim from Lashon Mishnah, they would be teaching Mishnah.
Okay, that could be.
Lishanot.
Sofrim are Lamdei Tinokos, and Mashnim are the ones to teach Mishnah. That could be a good shot. I like it. But Batei Knesios, because that's where they had the young kids used to learn in the Batei Knesios. We Shevet Levi, Batei Midrash, Sheyos Kumator. As we know, Shevet Levi, the Kohanim are the one, Ki Mitzio Teitzei Torah, Vayushem Yerushalayim. That's the Kohanim, right? Ki Sifsei Kohen Yishmeru Dat, V'Torah Vakshu Mipiu, right? It says in Malachi. V'Zel Lechora Ton Bir. Madua hufkar asido shel achinu chayidu shmiras tzivono shel ha'am dafke b'dei Shimon v'Levi. Ma mida keneged mida bazeh. Rashi says, what was the klala? I'm going to make them into malamdei tinokas. I'm going to make them into malamdei Mishnah, and I'm going to make them into malamdei Torah. Because what did they do? They did a terrible thing. Oh, that's very interesting, right? Those are the people. I don't remember the last time you took an ars and you made them Melamed Tinokas, right? You don't take Biryonim and you make them Rosh Yeshivas, right? So Reb Yaakov wants to know what the heck is going on here. Okay.
Sure. I don't want to cut. I don't want to cut off the flow, and that's really a difficult question. But I think I'm going to forget another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
At this point in time, in the explanation of Reb Yaakov, so when the sons answered Hamor and Shechem, the Torah says already, they answered them b'mirma.
100%.
Yaakov was there and he was listening.
Right.
What was he thinking? What was his Havamina? He thought they were really going to come, and he thought he understood. Oh, I know what they're doing. They're going to fool these guys into thinking. So, and they're going to do a milah, and then they're going to come in and kill these guys on the third day when they're weak. But he didn't think that they would kill the entire city.
No. I don't even know if he thought they're going to kill them. They're going to walk into the house when the guy is holding his, I hate to say it, right? He's like in pain, right? Yeah. They can't move, right? Don't forget, these are adults, right? They can't move. You walk into the house and you take Dina and you walk out.
Uh-huh.
And you leave the city, right? They probably would have moved on to where Avram Avinu, where Yitzchak was, in Hebron or in Beersheba. You move on. That's what Reb Yaakov was mashma before. He says it in the name of the Ramban already. He says it that's what Yaakov thought. That's why he didn't scream out and say anything, right? Because he should have said, "What's going on over here? What are you guys doing? What kind of crazy thing is that?" Because he thought that's what they must be doing, and then he's in shock that all of a sudden they kill the whole city. As Wayne just pointed out, well, just kill both of them. What do you got to kill? You kill Sinwar and you kill the other guy, I forget his name is, his brother, and then there was another guy, Def, I think his name was. He killed Def and Sinwar, right? And then the rest of the city, you don't have to worry, right? No, Shimon and Levi killed them, plus they knocked out the whole city. Okay? I mean, I want you to understand it wasn't like, 2 million people. There were little cities, and, each clan had was the head of the clan, like maybe, a few hundred people, and we don't know exactly how much, but they went in there. What? A shtetl, exactly.
Shtetls.
Exactly. So he says, Kanireh, and here Reb Yaakov comes up with an unbelievable yesod. Kanireh sheYaakov ra shehem yosem misharachem matimim lemisra ramazo. It seems that Yaakov saw that they were more shayach than all their other brothers. They were matim. They were the right guys for the job, this lofty job. Mitzhuva sam she'onu achizoni yaset achosenu hivchin Yaakov shehem masru et mehutam lemesima elyona she'atzolot kvod achosem. From the fact that they answer achizona, right? You want our sister to be a zona? We're not ready to put down her covet that way. Sorry, we're not making her into a zona for you, daddy. Right? Hivchin Yaakov she masru et mehutam. Their essence for this mission, this high mission of Atzolos Kvod Achosam. Gam Sharachim hoyu edim letzara ulekeeva shel dina achosam. The other brothers also were witnesses to this. V'gamlu b'daitem lazarla, and they certainly decided to help her. Avorak Shimon and Levi yergishu et tzara keiva keilu ze hatzar v'keiv shel atzmam. The difference between what we call empathy and sympathy. The brothers had sympathy, but they didn't have empathy. Shimon and Levi felt the pain was their pain. The pain Dina had is their pain. That's empathy. That's noisa ba'olim chavero. You feel mamish the pain. That Shimon and Levi went to that level. And Yaakov saw that when they said achazona, he didn't just see it in their words. He saw it in the way they said it. Hazaka shenimlotam, he says, the scream that escaped from their mouths, achazona yasas achsenu, hivira leYaakov shupulsam niv'a nava mitoch ke'ev pnimi v'shtatfus amitis b'tzara zula. The way they said it clarified for Yaakov that their action was came about through a pain, an inner pain, and hishtatfus amid b'tzar hazulas, which that's of course empathy. That's noisibahol. V'zehem ritzosam, and this made them hasten them. Lekanot boeres, lekanot boeres ubilti mitpasheret. That made them a kanoim boer, a burning kanos, right? Kanos means like, what do you call a kanoi? A zealot, right? A bilti mitpasheret. We don't make deals here. Okay, we're not mitpasher. We don't compromise. Ad kidei kach shelo matzu manoach lenafsham eleimke yarsu et kol ha'ir. Right? It wasn't just a plan; it was their essence. Right? They couldn't see their Jewish sister being treated this way, and be mitpasher with it in any way. Right? These guys have to be killed. Rak anoshim misug kazeh amargishim ke'ev azulas ke'ilu hu ke'ev atzmam. V'rak elu yikhu et maklam biyadam v'yimtzru nafsham u'modam. Just these are the type of people who will take their staff in their hand, and they'll be moser nefesh u'modam l'chol nafshcha l'chol modecha. Their whole strength. Kaylin dod me'ir le'ir lafitzes Torahs Hashem ba'olam u'lechanech es yaldei Yisrael. I remember where Yaakov said this. It was unbelievable. Yaakov said, "That's what I want to see a Rosh Hashiva doing, being moser nefesh, going from city to city to teach Torah. Right? It has to be burning in them. I don't become a Rosh Hashiva because it's choshev. I want to be a Rosh Hashiva because I get covered. It's nice and choshev. I made it to the top. No. Reb Yaakov says you become a Rosh Yeshiva because you see Klal Yisrael needs Limud HaTorah, right? And you want to create Limud HaTorah. That's the first and foremost reason, right? You feel the lack of Limud HaTorah in Klal Yisrael, and you become that, right? Rak elu yikhu maklam biyodam yivsh. Who's going to run around from city to city? Everyone wants to be in Jerusalem, right? Open up the yeshiva in Jerusalem, not in the Golan, not in Eilat, right? Not in Netanya. I want to be in Jerusalem. I want to be in Bnei Brak, right? Kedei lindog me'ir le'ir la'afitz Torahs Hashem ba'olam l'chanech es Yaldei Yisrael. That you need fire inside of you for. That you need to feel the need of Torah in Klal Yisrael. Mesima kedusha kazu eina mitbatzat kehogen el al yidei elu osem yosem echovasam mesimasam. This mission, this holy mission, doesn't come to fruition properly only on those that feel it's their obligation and mesima. It's not just a good covenant. Elu shekinas Hashem boeres bilvavam. The kanoyas of Hashem that we have to teach Torah to Klal Yisrael. We have to bring kedusha to Klal Yisrael. That's what you need. She says, wait, that's what they did with their sister, the holiness of their sister. She was a holy woman, and they made her into a zona. They couldn't handle that there was an unholy thing happen. I want those guys. I'm hiring those guys to be the Rosh Yeshivas and to be Melamdim. And therefore, it's not a stira. Yaakov realized at the time, right? He realized at the time when they said that, on the one hand, they have to be very careful. They have to use it in the right place. They have to use that kanois in the right, because you can use kanois in the wrong place. We know that. But if they use it in the right place, they are the ones that need to do it. I love this. He was finding for them their future hamatim lahem, the future mission that's matim for them. Lefi kochosam umeritzam, according to their powers and their zealousness, right? In other words, what is Reb Yaakov saying over here? That Yaakov gave each one a bracha. Rashi says at the end of all the brachas, ish kafi birchaso, right? Berachota. In other words, everyone according to his DNA, according to his personality, right? No one got the same brachas. Their personality was, on the one hand, it could be dangerous, but on the other hand, if they use it right, that's going to change the world. Okay. This is what Rabbi Yaakov said. So now let me tell you the two stories, and then the third thing about Wayne, right? Okay.
I still don't remember.
I know. Okay, good. So, but you'll see after I say it, you'll remember it. I'm positive. Anyway, so what happened with Meir Kahana was like this. Meir Kahana told me this story. I came to Florida, right? And I went to see Reb Yaakov. Somebody told him that Reb Yaakov would be sympathetic to the cause of being violent against the Russians until they let out the million Jews. Okay? So we went to Reb Yaakov to get haskama. And Reb Yaakov said to him like this: I think you're doing the right thing, but it's machshava shniya. Nach machshava rishon is diplomacy. Diplomacy with Russia, the communists, it won't help. Can't be diplomatic with them. But I can't come out and back you because I'm the head of Aguda. So it'll create that Reb Yaakov is a renegade. Reb Yaakov is a kanoi. It won't look good for Agudas Yisrael. Will suffer from it. So just Ramosha Feinstein is going to scream machshava rishona about what you're doing. But you, Rav Kahana, you have to do machshava shniya, right? And so let Ramosha yell. Don't feel bad. He's yelling machshava rishona, and you're doing machshava shniya, and it's not a stira. Okay? This is what he said to him. Now, don't forget, Meir Kahana is a Kohen. Just remind me from Shevet Lev. And now I want to tell you about Stephen Riskin, who's also a Kohen. Okay. Torah Masorah, Dr. Joe Kamenetsky. He was a very, very distant relative of ours, very distant. Joe Kamenetsky was the head of Torah Masorah. After Rav Shraga Feivel Mendelovich passed away, they looked for a head. He had a doctorate, plus he was a big mechanech from Chafetz Chaim Yeshiva, I'm pretty sure. And he went out and created the day schools all over America. Now, Joe Kamenetsky wanted to give an award to Rabbi Stephen Riskin. He was the Rav of Lincoln Square Synagogue on the upper, I think it's the Upper West Side, right? But right at the beginning of the Upper West Side, right? In the 70s, I think. So he wanted to give him an award because he was able to reach, okay, certain secular people that no one was able to touch. It's not true today, but then it was true. No one was able to touch these people. Who are these people?
He was a groundbreaker.
Yeah, he was a groundbreaker, exactly. He dealt with the yuppies, and he was able to get them into the shul, right? He was able to get them in the shul, and they used to come with the attaché case in hand, like right after work. They would come. Kabbalah Shabbos was at night. It wasn't in the day. It was, in the winter, it was at night, right? But he got them in, and he made a ton of them from, right? He did things in the shul that were unusual, right? He brought the Sefer Torah to the women also, on Simchas Torah. He did some unusual things. Reb Elias Svei from Philadelphia Yeshiva went nuts when he saw the roster that Rabbi Stephen Riskin is going to get an award for what he did in Chinuch. So he went nuts. So Dr. Joe Kamenetsky said the only way I'll be able to convince Rev Elias Shvei of Philadelphia Yeshiva, who was a Kanoi, he was mamash a Kanoi, is to go to Reb Yaakov. Since Reb Yaakov was on the board of Torah Masorah, right? He was like the guy, the go-to. Ramosha regarding that was not the go-to. He was part of it, but the go-to was Reb Yaakov. Go to Reb Yaakov. So Dr. Joe Kamenetsky sent Rabbi Riskin to Reb Yaakov to speak to him. So Reb Yaakov said, okay. He never met, Rabbi Riskin, obviously, but he went to speak to him, and he told him his whole life and where he learned and everything and what he's doing. And Reb Yaakov said like this: if you consider what you're doing machshava shniya, it's not the way Yahadus should be. I see Wayne's already smiling, right? It's machshava shniya, right? That's not the way you should really run a shul. But eis lasos Hashem eferus orasecha, there is a machshava shniya here. In order to make someone from, sometimes you can't go the straight way. You have to machshava shniya. If that's what you feel, you deserve the award. But if you think that this is the way things should run, I agree with Reb Elias Svei. So Rabbi Riskin said to him at the time that I'm doing this because of Kiruv. In a normal situation, if I didn't have a shul of Kiruv, I wouldn't be doing it. So Reb Yaakov said to Reb Elias Svei, he gets the award. That's what happened. Those are the two things where he used this thing. Just happens to be both of them were Kohanim. Okay, I'm just letting you know that. Now, the next thing that I told Wayne, I don't know if I told it to Wayne or I was talking to somebody and Wayne was listening, was like this. Professor Yehuda Levi, who became eventually the head of Machon Lev after Zev Lev passed away, who was a huge Talmud Chacham. He was huge, okay? And he was also a big professor. I mean, he was very great in optics, and he worked on optics for the army as well. It wasn't like just simply Pashut. He didn't deal with just glasses, so to speak, right? So what happened is he wrote the famous book Torah Study in Hebrew, and Rav Shach put it in Cherem, okay? And he went nuts. I mean, he felt terrible. He went to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and he was very upset about that. The book was put in Cherem. And why was it put in Cherem? Because over there he has Torah Derech Eretz too. He has all the different drachim in Torah. So he brings that, some people hold you're only supposed to have Torah. Tries to bring rayas to it. Other people hold you have to have Torah Derech Eretz today. It's not enough to just have Torah. You have Torah Derech Eretz. We're living in a different world than the shtetl. So Rav Shach put the book in Cherem, but he called Reb Yaakov before. And he said maybe Reb Yaakov will say that his haskama was just for Chutz La'aretz, not for Eretz Yisrael. So Reb Yaakov answered Rav Shach, and he said, "We're allowed to disagree." Okay. And then he called in Professor Yehuda Levi, and he said, "The Rav Shach is screaming because he's machshava rishona. He's not, if could be when Mashiach comes, we'll just sit and learn Torah. Okay? But today you can't have that. And that's why you wrote what you wrote. And I gave you a scum on it. Rebecca has a scum on the Sefer, right? Because I hold that today there's definitely room for another path also, what we call machshava shniyah, right? So let Rav Shach scream, and you do what you have to do. The same thing he told Meir Kahana about Ramosha Feinstein. Let Ramosha Feinstein scream, but you ignore it and do what you have to do. The same thing over here. This is what he said. Now, Wayne was nispol when I said this over. I don't know if I said it to Wayne or I said it to somebody else. But Wayne was nispol about the fact, wait a minute, they're both like doing the right thing. Rav Shach is yelling because he's loyal to the Masorah of Europe. And Professor Leon is doing the right thing because it isn't a little shtetl anymore in Europe anymore, right? So that's what Wayne, I remember, was the spol about that. Wow, you could be screaming and the other guy could be doing the right thing. Rashach is screaming that he's doing the wrong thing and putting him in cherem, and that guy goes on, ki'ilu, nothing happened, right? And he goes on and does what he says. That is what Rabbi Yaakov used for all these cases, and it's all like Rav Shach or Moshe didn't have this type of yidiyah. Of course, the Rambam talks about the way Rabbi Yaakov applied it to Shimon and Levi and to Yaakov. No one ever did that before, and therefore, I see I'm still getting all blurry over here. I don't know why, because I get too excited, maybe because the camera can't.
We know who you are. It's all right.
Yeah, it's okay. Anyway, because if I don't shake up and down, eventually it goes clear again. So, but anyway, so that's the yifsod that Reb Yaakov says over here, and I think it can change the way you think about a lot of things in our society today. It's change the way you think about a lot of things in our society. It's not just to apply over here. And I thought it was Maramas. When you deal with Hamas, you have to deal differently, not necessarily machshava rishona, machshava shniyah, because achzoni yaser, they kidnapped a lot of our Jews, and they certainly raped a lot of the Jews, right? So with those people like that, Reb Yaakov said I can't deal with them in the machshava rishona, and machshava shniyah, that's official, but unofficial, you have to do machshava shniyah. That's what you have to do. Okay, guys, we'll stop here. Any questions, points? You remember it, Wayne?
I have to admit that I don't remember it.
Well, maybe I'm making a mistake.
No, maybe I don't know. Maybe not. It could be that I've forgotten. But look, I think that distinction. I think that you can take all of what happens with American foreign policy, and you could describe it as machshava rishon and machshava shniyah. People like Biden, in their life, are not sophisticated enough in their thinking to understand Baklal that there's a machshava rishon and shniyah. They're Americans who are naive, and they think that you talk to Arabs in the same way that you talk to the French,
right? And
they don't understand it.
Right.
To this day, they don't understand it. And I think that there are people in America who do understand this. They understand
that it's the Middle East. It's not the Middle West.
Yeah, it's the Middle East, not the Middle West.
I think Moshe Aaron said it to one of the people. He said, "This is the Middle East, not the Middle West." Okay, guys, be well. We'll see you next week. Bezrat Hashem.
Just a quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Quick. Is there a difference in the machshava rishona shniya for Hashem versus us human beings. I mean,
So that's a great, he's pointing out a great thing. You normally would say maybe the Rambam means God, right? God, that's all the Rambam says. But you see, Rabbi Yaakov applied it to the two sets of people. So you see from Reb Yaakov, it's a chiddush. I'm not saying it's not a chiddush. Reb Yaakov holds it's a way to live life, Torah life as well. That's the chiddush. Well, I said Reb Moshe didn't have that, Reb Shach didn't have it. It could be that they would have learned the Rambam like you're saying. They would have said that, oh, the Rambam's talking about God. God can have machshava rishon, machshava shniya. But Yaakov, right? And Meir Kahana, right? But Rabbi Yaakov said he was clear that Meir Kahana was right. That's the way you have to deal with them. I remember him saying it to me. That he didn't say Meir Kahana because Meir Kahana told me the story. But he said sometimes you have to deal with the Russians in an unconventional way because you can't deal with them. They're Rishayim. You can't deal with them, right? So
I think that.
But yeah, I hear your point, Binyamin. I hear very good your point, Baruch. I mean, I hear your point. I hear the idea that you see that Rabbi Yaakov is applying it to the Bnei Yaakov and Yaakov. Yeah, what'd you say, Wayne?
I just want to add that, like in the other direction, thinking about it in the other direction, is that it's really important to understand that there is a machshava rishona and a machshava shniya. I think there are people who only think in terms of the machshava shniya, and they can sometimes lose the perspective that there is a machshava rishona that is the lechatchila way, and they only look in the b'diavad way.
They what?
Pardon?
What did you say? What was the last thing you said?
They only look in the b'diavad way. They only look at things in the machshava shniya way. And I mean, what I'm saying is, I think it's an important lesson that everything has this machshava rishona and shniya, and that you have to be aware that what's good, a good policy in one part of life, let's say, or in one situation, is not going to be there. There are times when you're going to have to be machshava rishona. There are times you're going to have to be machshava shniya. Right. And it will be a mistake to use the incorrect machshava in certain situations.
Correct, you're correct. In other words, Rabbi Yaakov held that in most cases you have to have machshava rishona. It's only in only unusual cases, like when the Jews left Egypt. It was an unusual case; they weren't really ready, so you have to try something else, right? But you're right. I mean, in most cases, Rabbi Yaakov felt the way is machshava, but he felt that the dealing with the Russians is not a normal thing. When someone wants to leave your country and you don't let them leave and you don't let them be who they want to be, right? That's already like Shechem and Hamor, right? You kidnap the Jews, all the Jews. You kidnap them. You can't let them leave. So you got to deal with that is Rishayim. You have to deal differently with kidnappers. And I'm sure he would have said the same thing with the terrorists. You have to deal machshava shniya with the terrorists, not machshava rishona. But with normal people that are not terrorists, you have to deal. Of course, you have to deal with a normal, and you shouldn't say machshava shniya is also mutter. No. When machshava rishona is mutter, machshava shniya is b'chlal not mutter. It's only when you don't have machshava rishona that machshava shniya mamish comes a lichatchila.
Thank you.
Okay, sei gesund, guys.
Tודה רבה.